Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with Cindy this week.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about outlets, Gfcis, electrical testers, and some tips on what to be looking for when you purchase an outlet. Always turn off the electric to any circuit that you're working on. And
why don't we explain what a circuit is first?
So an electrical circuit is a continuous loop of power starting at the service panel, and it travels to switches and outlets or lights and comes back to the service panel. Service panel is where you have your circuit breakers or fuses, and each one of these controls a different circuit or a different group of wires. And
so like your kitchen will be on a circuit, your living room will be on a different circuit.
Yes, and it's important to shut off the power to the circuit you're working on because there's hundreds of electrocutions every year and thousands of people are injured from electrical incidents. You should also double check any circuit you're working on with an electrical tester. When I first started buying real estate, we would hire guys to help us learn these projects. And one story that always stuck with me, this electrician, when he first started, the electrician he worked with would be working on a circuit. He would send this kid to shut off the breakers one by one, and the gentleman would lick his finger and touch the wire to see whether he had shut off the right breaker.
That doesn't sound smart.
No, and what happened one day was the guy collapsed. They were in this house. A lady was screaming for this guy to run upstairs, and they called the ambulance, and he actually died from a heart attack because if you get a shock at the wrong time, it'll actually put your heart in fibrillation. So it just a sad story, but it always stuck with me, and he just emphasized the point, always use a tester on any circuit you're working on. So I'll share with you 3 testers that I like. In fact, I'll share with you another tester. We just did a video. If you go to...
So how many testers?
Now it's going to be 4. So if you go to our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement channel on YouTube, I show how to use this. It's a circuit breaker finder from Sperry, and they run around $25, $30. It has a little device that you plug into an outlet. It sends out a signal, and then you have a handheld device that you wave over a service panel so that you can find the breaker that's operating the outlet that this transmitter's on. So just a very slick device if you're looking to find which breaker operates an outlet. But a couple of key testers. One is just an outlet tester. You plug this into an outlet, and it has different LED lights, and it tells you whether the outlet is grounded, whether it's polarized correctly, and then whether the circuit's on. So that's real nice to have, especially for electronic equipment. It's important that the outlet is polarized. Also, if you're...
What does that mean?
So the electricity is coming in one side. So you plug in, let's say, an electronic device. You have 2 plugs. The narrow plug should be the hot, and the wide side of the plug should be the neutral. They're designed so that the electricity is supposed to be coming in one side, passing through the electronic equipment out the other side. If your plug is reversed, or if your receptacle is reversed and it's not polarized correctly, it'll actually shorten the life of your electronics. Also, it tells you whether your outlet is grounded, which is a safety feature. And also, if you're using a surge protector, it won't work if the outlet's not grounded. So it's just a nice tester to have in your toolbox. I like a non-contact electrical tester rather than the little pigtail. When we first started, investing in real estate, we had no money, so we bought the cheapest everything. And we would use these little, it had 2 little leads that you touch on wires or touch into outlets.
Kind of looks like a wishbone.
Yeah, like a little wishbone shape, and it has a little light on the end of it, a little LED light. I don't like these for a couple of reasons. One, you have to get your hands very close to exposed wires to test the wires to see whether the circuit's on. When you're working outside, I always had trouble seeing it, and in some outlets, if the contacts aren't very firm, you don't get a good reading. So I don't like those little testers with the pigtails. So I prefer these non-contact testers. You press the button on it, it gives a chirp and a little light so you know it's working, the battery's working, and then you just put it close to the outlet and it chirps to tell you that the circuit is on. And it's also great for switches and lights. You can use it for a lot of things. I think it's far superior for the average homeowner.
We've done a video on
did a video on that too on the channel. And then I think if you're doing a lot of electrical work or you plan to do a lot of projects around the house, I think that every homeowner should have a multimeter. And this will allow you not only to test the circuits to see whether they're on, you can test, let's say you have an electric water heater, it'll test for 240 volts, it'll test for a standard 120 volts, you can test batteries, you can test a 12 volt battery, 9 volt battery, you can test, then also test for continuity. So you can check to see whether a fuse is working. Again, if you have an electric water heater, you can test the elements to make sure that they're working properly. So just an excellent tool to have if you're doing a lot of projects. If you had at least a non-contact electrical tester and just an inexpensive multimeter, I think you can get, like Gardner Bender has one, which is a high quality tester for around $15 at hardware stores. So not a lot of money, and it does, it's really going to help you do your electrical projects safely. So let's go over some outlet basics. If you're changing an outlet in your home, you want to make sure that you turn off the electric to that circuit and then double check it with an electrical tester to make sure the electricity's off. You're going to remove the cover, and then you're going to remove the 2 screws that hold the outlet in place. And you're either going to have one cable attached to that outlet, which is going in.
What do you mean a cable?
So in the U.S., in most locations, you're going to have a white wire, a black wire, and a ground wire, and that's one cable with those 3 wires. There's a couple places in the U.S. like Chicago, Seattle, that they don't use a ground wire because it's metal conduit, it's metal boxes, and so that's all grounded all the way to the service panel and outside into the ground. And
so what does the rest of the country use?
So the rest of the country uses non-metallic cable. So you're going to have a hot wire, a neutral wire, and a ground. In the U.S., your hot wire is black or red, your white wire is neutral, and then you're going to have a bare copper wire for your ground or a green wire. And you're going to have one cable with these 3 wires coming into a box connected to an outlet, or you're going to have 2 cables. If this outlet is connected to another electrical box, you're going to have one cable coming in with 3 wires and then another cable leading to another outlet with 3 wires. So on the outlet itself, you're going to have brass screws and silver screws. The brass screws are going to be connected to your hot wires, which are your black and red in the U.S., and then the silver screws are connected to the neutral wire, which is your white wire, and then you have a green screw that's connected to the ground.
So you're going to go buy a new outlet.
Okay.
You get to the aisle, and some of them are 59 cents, some of them are, $3. What's the difference?
So if there's a big difference on the components inside the outlet itself, and most people don't realize that. If you have, let's say that you have a couch that you have in your living room, and it covers the outlet, and you never use it, you're repainting your room, you want to change all the outlets, and this outlet that you're replacing, you really never use. I would definitely buy a 59-cent outlet. But if it's one of the outlets that you're constantly plugging a vacuum into, or anything that you're using, you definitely want to spend a couple of dollars for a better outlet, because the components, the parts that hold the plug in place, are much better quality, and it's going to stand up to this constant plugging and unplugging.
Well, we just redid all the outlets at my condo, and they were so old that, some of the plugs wouldn't even stay in the outlet.
Yeah, they get loose. Yeah. It doesn't grab it at all.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, amazing. So it definitely pays to spend a couple dollars more for, the outlet. And the one thing you're thinking about before you run to the hardware store is, how many amps was that circuit? So you want to look at the service panel and look at the fuse or the circuit breaker, and it's going to say 15 or 20 on it. And you need to make sure that you replace it with the correct outlet. So you want to now look for an outlet that's either 15 or 20 amp. And it's easy to see when you look at it, a standard outlet for 15 amps is just going to have the 2 parallel slots. On a 20 amp outlet, there's going to be that T on the neutral side. So you're going to have a small slot, and then the wider slot is going to be a T shape. And if you put a 15 amp outlet on a 20 amp circuit, it can actually have the potential for a fire, and it can melt the plastic. So it's very important that you know what size circuit you're working on. Next thing you want to look at is when you remove the old outlet is if any of the tabs are removed. So there's a piece of metal that connects the two screw terminals on each side. So on the brass side, especially if you have a switched outlet, that little tab, that little piece of metal that connects the two screw terminals, they'll break that off. And that allows one side of the outlet to always be on, and then the other side of the outlet is controlled by a switch. When you replace that outlet, you need to take a needle nose pliers, grab that little tab, bend it back and forth, and snap it off. So that's one more thing that you're looking at.
My aunt and uncle just redesigned their living room.
Okay.
And where they plug in their TV to that outlet, now it's a switched outlet.
Uh-huh.
So my uncle keeps complaining that my aunt keeps running into the living room
So
and
when she's
flipping
mad
up.
at him, she flips it off.
Oh, it's just tap it. You flip on the switch, right?
Right.
And so he's complaining that she keeps screwing up the TV. And I said, you could fix that, right? So
We'll do a video. The last thing you should be thinking about when you remove an outlet and change it is where it's located. If it's in the kitchen, on the countertops, the bathroom, in an unfinished basement, outside, a garage, a crawl space, you should be changing that outlet with a Gfci. And that stands for ground fault circuit interrupter, and this will turn off the power in a fraction of a second if there's a chance that you could get a shock or possible electrocution. So you want to talk about Gfcis?
yes.
Okay. All right. So there's a few different types. And one thing that confuses people is how to wire them. When you get a Gfci, almost all manufacturers are going to tape off the load side. So there's going to be two screw terminals with a piece of tape over it, and it's going to say load in most cases. So on a Gfci, on the back of it, you're going to have two screw terminals that say line and two screw terminals that say load. The line is going to have a brass and a silver screw. Your brass is going to go to the hot wire, your silver to the neutral wire. And if you only have one cable coming into your electrical box, you're just using that line side. So you're connecting the two wires and the ground to this Gfci. If you have two cables, so you have 6 wires that you're connecting, so you have this Gfci is connected to another outlet, you're going to be using the load side. And so you're going to use the one cable on the line side, the other cable on the load side. The key to finding out what wires go where, if you didn't, let's say you removed your old outlet and you didn't mark which wires were on the line or the load side, or let's say you had a traditional outlet and now you're changing it to a Gfci, you have to know what side is line and what side is load. So you turn off the breaker to this circuit and you're going to separate all of these wires. You take off the old outlet, you separate all your wires, and now you're going to turn the outlet back on, so you want to make sure that those wires are not touching anything. And this is where you need an electrical tester. You're going to test the two hot wires and see which one has electricity going to it. This is your line side. You're going to mark it with a little piece of masking tape. You're going to go turn your circuit breaker back off or remove the fuse, and then you're going to wire up the cable with the hot to the line side. The other cable is going to go to the load side. And now when you're connecting it like this, then any of the outlets connected to that load side is actually going to be protected by this Gfci.
So Gfcis are expensive in
Yes.
comparison to a regular outlet. Can you use any Gfci outside?
So on an outside Gfci, it needs to be marked WR for weather resistant. And so this will stand up to fluctuations in humidity and moisture. So that's what you're looking for. And a lot of people don't realize that. So they buy a traditional Gfci, they put it outside, and they get all these phantom trippings. So the internal circuit breaker is constantly tripping because it's not designed to be outside. And then also, on the same train of thought, on regular outlets that you use outside. So outside now the code is in the US that you have the outlets outside protected by a Gfci. Now you don't need a Gfci on every outlet. You have to have the first one on that circuit a Gfci, and all the other outlets can be just a standard outlet. But you would want to get an outlet that's marked WR, so a regular outlet that's weather resistant also. So again, something else to look for. There's a couple new interesting Gfcis that you can pick up. One has a nightlight on it for bathrooms.
They have regular outlets that have.
Yeah.
Night lights on it.
They have LEDs now, so they last like 20 years, which is really convenient. Kids' rooms, really nice. And
they're super bright, too.
yeah, amazing. And they also have a nice one that's for sump pumps, or let's say you have a freezer in your garage or basement. When the electricity goes out, it starts chirping, so that it lets you know. Or let's say if your breaker just went out on your sump pump circuit, you know that there's no electricity, so your sump pump, this thing starts chirping. So really nice. Also some interesting standard outlets. They have outlets now that have the USB ports. And so you can have one side that just a traditional receptacle, and then you can plug in all of your smart devices on the other side. It has a built-in transformer. So there's some nice stuff at the hardware store that you can pick up. Also, one other thing, after 2008, most of the code in the U.S., they call for tamper-resistant outlets. And the way these are designed are they have little plastic spring-loaded shutters on the openings of the receptacle, and both of these shutters have to be pushed at the same time to compress these springs. So if a kid had, let's say, a key or a paper clip and tried to push it in one of the slots, it won't open. So, really nice design. It's nice that they're, mandating this in homes now, because there's about 2,000 people who get shocks and burns every year from receptacles, and a lot of it's kids clowning around with receptacles. So when you're in the hardware store, I think there's still a lot of the standard outlets available, but now more and more it's these tamper resistant, and I would always look for it. It's marked TR on the outlet itself.
So speaking of new codes, why don't you talk about for your outdoor outlets? So
exterior covers now. So if you have an outside outlet, now the old covers that were just those gray covers where they snap in place spring loaded, now they require that you have a bubble cover, a big plastic bubble that goes over the outlet outside, and this allows the extension cord to be put up through this, and you plug it into the outdoor outlet, and then you close this cover over the top of it, and it protects it against moisture. So just an interesting design, and it's much safer, especially for Christmas lights, and if you're working outside with power equipment and it starts misting, it's nice to have this protected from moisture.
So why don't you tell me some history about outlets?
History of outlets?
Yes.
I don't know about outlets specifically, but I know that it wasn't...
Shouldn't you, if we're doing an outlet podcast?
I didn't do my homework, I apologize. But I know that in Chicago, I know a little Chicago history. The Palmer House, my dad was a jazz musician, and he played the Palmer House a lot, so every once in a while I'd go there and watch him play. And I talked to some of the guys there, and they were one of the first hotels in the country in 1880 to have electricity.
Wow, how old are you?
It's not me. But and then Philadelphia was about the same year they started putting it out on their street lights on the sidewalks. But it wasn't until the 1920s when they started putting it in more homes and most neighborhoods. So to recap some of the outlet basics, you should be checking to make sure it's a 15 or 20 amp circuit. You also want to look at the outlet itself to make sure that tab is intact, and then you want to consider where it's located so that you're purchasing the right outlet.
I think that wraps up this episode.
Yes, and if you want to see any projects, you can go to our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement channel. We have a playlist for electrical projects, so you can watch us change outlets and Gfcis. Also have a couple really nice videos on electrical testers. You can subscribe on our YouTube channel, and if you like the podcast, please subscribe. You can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher.
If you liked us, leave us a review.
Please leave a review. Tell a friend. And if you want to get in touch with us, our email is fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
I'll talk to you next week.